So today's the day. 10 months after we review the Fanatec CSL steering wheel P1 for Xbox One, say that 5 times fast, and about a month and a half after we did our first look on the CSL Elite Wheel Base, we are back here today to finally review it. Review a wheelbase that has a lot of hype behind it, because this wheelbase has the tunability of its big brother, the ClubSport Wheelbase V2, and allegedly has force feedback somewhere between the CSW V1 and the CSW V2, but at only half the price. So, let's see if we should all get aboard the hype train.
Sim racing chassis provided by Next Level Racing. Check them out at nextlevelracing.com.
So even though we've had the Fanatec CSL Elite Wheelbase in our hands for a little while now, we're still a few weeks out before the general public can purchase the wheel. Now, you have had the opportunity to pre-order the wheel from Fanatec.com, which is the only place you can buy Fanatec gear. So for those of you who have pre-ordered, I guess you'll find out soon enough if you made a good decision. But before we get to that and how the CSL Elite Wheelbase performed, let's go over some of its specs. The CSL Elite Wheelbase is compatible with the PC and Xbox One only. It does not have compatibility with the PlayStation 4, nor will it ever get compatibility with the PlayStation 4 in the future. It features a brushless servo motor, which delivers over 6 Nm of torque, and a single belt drive unit to deliver said torque. It has up to 1080 degrees of rotation. It is made primarily of plastic with an integrated rev light bar. It comes with a table clamp, but can be hard mounted with 3 mounting holes for M6 diameter bolts. It has a metallic quick release system that's compatible with not only the P1 rim, but the Xbox One Universal Hub and all other rims that are offered from Fanatec. It also features mounting holes for the ClubSport static shifter paddles. It has upgradable firmware via the PC, so even if you're getting this for the Xbox One, it's a good idea to have a PC close by. And an I/O panel that features USB, power, pedals, handbrake, and shifter 1 and 2 connections, meaning you can run one Fanatec shifter in sequential mode and another in H pattern at the same time, making you, sir, a baller! Yeah, pink hype towels. This is what happens when you're the only guy in the house. Anyway, moving on to the impressions of the CSL Elite Wheelbase, and let's talk about aesthetics. So, the CSL Elite Wheelbase isn't a bad-looking wheelbase. It just could be a lot better looking if it wasn't so busy. There's literally 3 different designs going on here. You have the textured, digitized front that actually shimmers a bit and kind of looks a little cool. Then you have the glossy sides that look like they were inspired by the Xbox One console. Lastly, you have the top with pretty cheap looking gray and black plastic. While we're not expecting it to be a looker or have aluminum construction at the $299.95 price point, we do expect a uniform design theme and quality plastics on all sides, and it's just not there. While the design is all over the place, the packaging is on point, with it coming in at a fairly compact 35 by 35 by 28 centimeters. The I/O panel on the back is also easily accessible, not requiring the finger acrobatics that the CSW V2 base requires with its tucked away panel. So this is normally the point in the review where I say we went and we mounted the wheel on the rig and we started driving it and started giving you my impressions on how it felt. But with the Fanatec CSL Elite Wheelbase, this isn't the case. If you watched our first look of the CSL Elite Wheelbase and Pedals LC, you know that I busted out the metallic fitting in the wheelbase while tightening it to my next level cockpit. Well, there's a reason why that happened. First off, the metal fittings weren't glued in place, which, for the record, Fanatec told me when I received the wheel. It was a prototype wheel, and they hadn't glued in those fittings, and they said, don't torque on them too hard. And I did. So that's on me, and I've got a new wheel, and the new wheel certainly feels like they're glued in now in the way they're supposed to be for production. But there's a reason why I was trying to tighten the wheel, not even so much, but just get it a little bit tighter than what I had it. and that's because the wheelbase kept on bouncing up and down on me. While there are 3 threaded mounting holes on the wheelbase, I only wanted to use the 2 back mounts because they use the traditional Fanatec mounting hole pattern, a hole pattern that the Next Level cockpit is already pre-drilled for. But after a bit of testing, it became clear why the 3rd hole is there, to pin down the front of the wheelbase. The issue I have is I can't use the front hole mount even if I wanted to, because there's a crossbar on the Next Level. Knowing that, I decided to go and check out some of the other rigs that we have laying around here and see if they could be retrofitted to those wheel decks. The Track Racer has a front hole there that I thought would work, but it's impossible to access, and it actually doesn't even align, and drilling a new hole would be impossible with the radius of the front edge of the wheel deck, so that was a no-go. The GT Omega Art wheel deck could work because there is space there to drill a hole, but again, you have to drill a hole. And the Abutta Ozone needs all holes drilled since it doesn't come pre-drilled, but I'm not 100% sure you can drill the front hole due to the cross members. So this leaves us with 3 scenarios. First up, you can just tough it out and run with the 2 bolts in the back holes and just deal with the wheel bouncing up and down. The second option is to just drill a hole in your rig if you have the space to drill a hole, and obviously you have a drill and drill bits. And if I had this option with my Next Level, this is what I would have done. But as we talked about, I have at least 2 and maybe 3 of the 4 rigs here where that's not even a possibility. So again, that kind of sucks. They have to go and pull out the drill, but you know, it's not the end of the world. Or lastly, you can do what I've started doing, and you can just fold up some Post-it notes and shove it under the front of the wheelbase, and that kind of helps, you know, make it so it's not bouncing around so bad. I did purposely leave out the included wheel clamp as an option because wheel clamps really only work on desktops with uniform thicknesses and not rigs with framework underneath the wheel deck. If you're racing on a desk, I would assume that the wheel clamp would work fine, but for most people that are shopping in this price range, they either have a rig or are getting a rig, so this isn't really an option. And if you're on a rig, you want to be hard mounting the wheelbase with bolts to the wheel deck. As for tightening the bolts themselves, like I mentioned earlier, the inserts do feel like they're now glued into place. With that said, when I was actually dismounting the wheel from the rig, as you'll see later, I was doing a lot of swapping back and forth of wheels, and as I was unscrewing the bolts, it felt again like the right bolt was really catching in that insert, and it wasn't easy to back out. And I was actually concerned that it was going to snag and get stuck again and cause the same issue I had on the first wheel. Luckily, I went slow and it came out. But, you know, these inserts, again, aren't very confident inducing. I haven't had any other wheels here that I'm afraid to tighten or to pull the bolts out, but the CSL Elite Wheel Base, it gives me some concern. And I also want to mention that I was making sure that I wasn't tightening the bolts very tight, since I already know how that went. So I wasn't tightening them really tight, and also, even if you do tighten these bolts tighter, you still don't eliminate the bounce that's there in the wheel base on the wheel deck. So it doesn't really make a difference. So if you're going to pick this up, don't go and over tighten these. It doesn't make any difference. So leaving that con and moving on to something a little more positive, let's talk about the tunability of the CSL Elite Wheelbase. The tuning menu has all the on-the-fly adjustability of the ClubSport Wheelbase V2 with options such as degrees of rotation, force feedback, vibration, dead zone, linearity, force modifiers, and even adjustments for Fanatec pedals such as ABS and brake force with the new use of the rev lights for brake adjustments that we talked about in our CSL Elite Pedals LC review. So now let's turn our attention to driving performance, and here I could have just driven with the wheelbase and given you feedback on what I felt, but I wanted to take it one step further and do something that can give you a frame of reference. So I decided to do a little head-to-head comparison, and I brought out the CSL's big brother, the CSW V2, to compare it to, and then also its closest price point comparison, and that would be the Thrustmaster TX. Besides, if I didn't compare it here, I know you guys in the comment section would be asking for a comparison, and that'd be another video and more work for me. So we're gonna kill two birds with one stone right now. The head-to-head testing confirmed our first look impressions that the CSL, or ClubSport Lite, is a slightly lighter, edged-down version of the CSW V2. Like Bud Light to Budweiser, except without the pounding headaches, the CSL gives you the CSW feeling, but just a little toned down and at half the price. The force feedback isn't quite as strong as the CSW V2. I would say probably about 75%, which is still strong enough, especially considering the price point. As for smoothness of the belt-driven force feedback, I really couldn't feel a difference between the two, with the wheel feeling very nice and smooth around most corners. And I'll explain the most corners comment in a moment. So, compared to the Thrustmaster TX, the Fanatec CSL force feedback is a little stronger and is delivered a little smoother. With that said, I did like the TX's on-center feel more. Both Fanatec's belt drives tended to jerk the wheel around more when close to on-center than the Thrustmaster, which was more consistent feeling across all the degrees of rotation. So this is why I said smooth at most corners. When you would enter a high-speed corner like the Chase at Bathurst, and it would just be a small input of the wheel was really fighting you and really wasn't following what your hands are doing, getting kind of jerky in there, when with the TX, it would respond to the inputs that you give it. Now, there are some adjustments in the software for the Fanatics, and you can put in some dead zone and put in some linearity to try to help that on-center feel, and I did both, but both made just the wheel feel actually worse, and I just preferred running both those settings off. So yeah, the TX on center felt a little better. Once you get past on center, then I would say the Fanatec wheels felt a little better. I am a little disappointed in the vibration, or I should say lack of vibration, exhibited by the CSL. It just doesn't rumble as much as I like to see when going off-road or over curbs. With that said, the TX doesn't rumble much more, so I guess this is just par for the course at this price point. The interesting thing about this little head-to-head is that I enjoyed using all three wheels. They all have good enough performance where I find the driving experience enjoyable. So you have the CSW V2 that has the strongest force feedback, and then you have the CSL with a little less strong force feedback, and then you have the TX with a little less stronger than that. You have the TX smoothness, which has it's a little, you can feel it a little bit more than say the Fanatics, which feel a little bit smoother. But then on the TX, I prefer the on-center feel, where I feel like the car is not fighting me as much at very low degrees of rotation corners or going down the straightaway versus the Fanatics. So overall, these wheels are a lot more even than you would probably think, and they're all pretty enjoyable to drive across the board. So let's get to our final thoughts on the Fanatec CSL Elite Wheel Base. And I think the best way to put it is, when we look at the CSL family, we already reviewed the pedals with the load cell, and I really like those. I had a lot of good things to say and nothing really bad to say about the pedals. A big fan of them. But I'm having a hard time using the same words to describe the wheelbase. If I had to sum up the wheelbase in one sentence, I would say that it has good performance, but it has some flaws. On the pro side, it comes in a compact package, has plenty of on-the-fly tunability, has strong force feedback that's delivered smoothly, and comes in at a reasonable $300 price point. On the con side, it has a busy-looking design, some lower quality plastics. Hard mounting it isn't confidence-inducing endeavors. The on-center driving feel could be better, and it bobs up and down quite a bit unless you can utilize the front bolt or jerry-rig some kind of solution. This leaves me really torn on this wheel. Part of me says this is a really good wheelbase from a performance side. Another part of me says this isn't the best from a quality side. If we look at the other wheels that we had in this little shootout, from Thrustmaster TX and T300, I've been running those wheels like crazy for a while now, and they've performed and they've had good quality. I haven't had any issues with them. I've been happy. Then you look at the ClubSport CSW V2. While I haven't run ours as much as the Thrustmasters, every time I use it, it works flawlessly, no issue. So the question becomes, should you pick up the CSL Elite Wheel Base for the PC and/or Xbox One over the TX or CSW V2? Well, that depends where your price point is and the performance per price ratio. You can have the CSL Elite Wheel Base for $300 and a CSL P1 rim for $140 for a total of $440 here in the US. You can have the Thrustmaster TX wheelbase for $260 and the 599 Evo 30 Alcantara rim for $180 for a total of, yes, $440. I would also strongly consider the Thrustmaster Ferrari F1 rim also, knocking down the total price to $410, but either way, the CSL and TX are directly competing against one another on price. So what would I take? Well, for me, performance is a bit of a wash. There's times where I like the CSL more, and there's times where I like the TX more. What it really comes down to for me is choice of rims and also the bobbing on the CSL and whether or not you can use that third bolt and secure that wheelbase from moving up and down. I do prefer the Thrustmaster rim choices over the P1 CSL rim. I don't think the P1 is a bad rim, and it has some nice features, but it does have a plasticky feel and is wrapped in hard rubber, making it not nearly as nice as holding on to the great feeling Thrustmaster 599XX Alcantara rim or the very functional and nicely shaped Ferrari F1 rim. With that said, toss out the P1 and insert in the ClubSport steering wheel Formula Black for a grand total of $480, and I may be singing a different tune. That is, if I had a rig where I could actually use the front hole placement and keep the wheelbase from bouncing up and down. And that brings up a point where you really shouldn't have to go out and buy a new rig just because a wheelbase or manufacturer or whatever is struggling to have it function properly. People already have these different rigs out there, and when there's plenty of rigs on the market that aren't drilled for this or can't even possibly be drilled for this based off their design, it doesn't really work out. You shouldn't have to go buy another rig. So for that reason, for me, I give the nod to the TX over the CSL. But what if you want to spend a little more money? And what if you want to go and maybe instead of getting the CSW V2 and getting the Xbox One Universal Hub, maybe you want to save some money and get the Universal Hub and pair it with the CSL. Is that a good idea? And the answer is, I don't know if that's a good idea. While I did like using the Universal Hub because the rims there are super nice and I used it on the CSL and it worked out okay once I shoved Post-it notes under the front of it. You're spending $700 to get to that point. $300 for the CSL, another $400 for the Universal Hub plus rim. At that point, you're only $300 away from the CSW V2. And if you're going to spend $700 at that point, to some degree, it's kind of like, what's another $300 to make sure you have something that's more reliable and a wheelbase isn't going anywhere, and one that's of all aluminum construction. Now, I don't think there's a $300 gap in performance. The CSL, performance-wise, isn't that far off of the CSW V2. It's just, these ancillary things. It's this mount and more plastic construction. So part of me is already like, if you're going to go and get something that's a heavy-duty metal piece like the Universal Hub, probably not a bad idea to have, a metal wheelbase versus the plastic of the CSL that is going to last. So not that the CSL won't necessarily last, it's just that at this point we don't know. And so far, like I said, the confidence isn't fully there at a few points. I'm worried about the hard mounts, the bouncing up and down. I mean, you can only, you can shove Post-it notes in there, but is that the right way to be doing it? You really shouldn't have to do that if you're spending $300 on a wheelbase. So Yeah, the CSL is in a precarious position because I don't know if I can, at this moment, recommend it over the TX, or if you're looking to spend more money, over the CSW V2. Those other wheels just seem like they have reasons to go above the CSL. If Fanatec figured out a way to overcome these mounting issues and release some more desirable sub $200 rims, we think that the Fanatec CSL Elite Wheel Base would be a lot more attractive. Thanks for watching this review of the Fanatec CSL Elite Wheel Base. This one took a while. As you see, there was a lot going on here, and deciding to kind of throw the comparison in while we were working on this review definitely made it take longer, but you know, these things take a while when you go this in-depth. So again, thank you for hanging with us and watching the review. If you like it, please give it a like. Subscribe to Inside Sim Racing if you haven't, if you want to see more coverage like this. Check out our website, isrtv.com, for the latest news, reviews, and forums. Check out the Amazon affiliate link in the description below. We now have a link for you guys in the UK, and also, maybe even by the time you're watching this video, we should have links for Canada and Germany and other countries. So now, if you're around the world, you can support Inside Sim Racing by shopping on Amazon like you always do, and we get a little bit back. So for John Sable, thanks for watching Inside Sim Racing. See you guys next time.